Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed. Today, we're zeroing in on a statement I think most of us have heard, maybe even found some comfort in. God hates the sin but loves the sinner. It's a powerful idea, right? Shapes how many people think about God's compassion. But here's our mission for today. We're going to take just one ancient source, Psalm 11, and really dig into whether its actual language, lines up with that belief. Sometimes going straight to the text can show you something, well, maybe more complex, maybe even something that challenges what we thought.
Exactly. And it's so valuable to step outside those common sayings sometimes and really get to grips with what specific texts, like this psalm, are actually saying. We're going straight to the source material here. And this one, Psalm 11, is titled Of David. So that immediately sets an expectation, doesn't it? Probably something personal, probably dealing with tough challenges, maybe looking for God to step in.
Okay, so let's jump right into David's situation at the start of the psalm. He kicks off with this really bold statement, "In the Lord I take refuge." But then, almost in the same breath, he's pushing back against advice he's getting. "How then can you say to me, 'Flee like a bird to your mountain'?" So clearly he's under pressure, right? People are telling him to just run, get away from the danger, but David seems determined to stand his ground based on his faith. What exactly is this threat that's making people urge him to flee?
Well, the psalm doesn't leave us guessing for long. Verse 2 spells it out. It says, "For look, the wicked bend their bows. They set their arrows against the strings to shoot from the shadows of the upright in heart." So this isn't just some vague problem. It's active, planned hostility. These wicked people aren't just, flawed. They're actively aiming to harm the upright in heart, those trying to live justly. It's deliberate.
Wow, yeah, that paints a really clear and frankly pretty scary picture. And it feels like it escalates beyond just a threat to David himself. Verse 3 asks this big question: when the foundations are being destroyed, what can the righteous do?
That sounds like more than just personal danger. It sounds like the whole basis of society, maybe justice, is crumbling. So if everything's falling apart, what kind of divine response is David looking for, or perhaps expecting?
What's really fascinating here, I think, is how these first few verses draw such a sharp line. It's not just good versus evil in the abstract, it's very concrete. You have the upright in heart, who are under direct threat, and then you have the wicked, who seem to, enjoy violence. It's not just about sin as a concept, it's about these specific groups of people and their actions. And that really sets up the tension, doesn't it? It makes you wonder, okay, how is God going to react to this kind of injustice, this stark divide? Right, and that question leads us perfectly into this shift in the psalm's focus. It pulls us away from the chaos on earth up to the heavenly perspective. It seems to say, even when things look bad down here, God isn't blind or absent. Verse 4 says, "The Lord is in his holy temple, the Lord is on his heavenly throne." And then, "He observes everyone on earth, his eyes examine them." That's quite a contrast to the crumbling foundations, isn't it? What's the significance of placing God on his throne, in his temple, right at this moment?
That image of God in his holy temple and on his heavenly throne, it's loaded with meaning. It's a powerful statement about divine authority, about active governance. He's in control. He's the ultimate judge. He's not detached. And that phrase, "his eyes examine them," that's key too. This isn't just a passive look. It implies deep scrutiny. Like he's really investigating everyone, the righteous and the wicked, seeing right through them.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting for our conversation today. This is where Psalm 11 directly hits on that core question about God hates the sin but loves the sinner. It's right here in the next verse. Listen to verse 5. "The Lord examines the righteous, but the wicked, those who love violence, he hates with a passion." Wow, I mean, that language is incredibly strong. It just leaps off the page. It draws such a stark contrast. God examines the righteous, okay, a close look, maybe testing, maybe affirming. But then for the wicked, those who love violence, the psalm says, he hates with a passion. That's still it's not mild disapproval, is it? It sounds like a powerful active aversion. And it seems aimed directly at this group described by their actions and character, the wicked, those who love violence. It feels like it goes beyond just hating the act of violence. How does that strong phrase, hates with a passion, work here? What's it telling us?
You're right. It's incredibly direct. And I think this verse poses a real challenge to that simplified saying. Here, the hatred isn't vaguely directed at sin. It's explicitly aimed at the wicked, who are defined by their character and actions, specifically their love of violence. It seems to be out the people themselves, those who embody and commit this wickedness. And the intensity of hates with a passion, nephesh in Hebrew, relating to the soul or inner being, suggests a deep, personal, almost visceral response from God. It implies that God's justice and his very character in this psalm's portrayal include this powerful act of revulsion towards those who persistently embrace wickedness and violence. It really forces you to think, doesn't it? What does it mean if a biblical text describes God-hating people defined this way? How does that fit with other ideas about God's love or mercy?
It's definitely something to wrestle with. And the psalm doesn't stop at God's emotion. It moves straight into the consequences, the divine action that follows this passionate hatred. Verse 6 is just as vivid. On the wicked he will rain fiery coals and burning sulfur. A scorching wind will be their lot. I mean, that describes some incredibly harsh consequences. These aren't subtle punishments. It's destruction aimed squarely at the wicked.
Absolutely. And these aren't just random punishments either. There are specific consequences for the wicked people identified earlier. That imagery, fiery coals, burning sulfur, scorching wind, it's classic language for complete and devastating divine judgment in the ancient world. Think Sodom and Gomorrah, though obviously different contexts, the imagery resonates. It underscores the severity of God's response in this psalm to those he hates with a passion. It's total devastation.
So after that incredibly intense picture of judgment, the psalm then kind of pivots back. It concludes by reminding us of God's fundamental nature, and it contrasts the fate of the righteous beautifully. Verse 7 tells us, "For the Lord is righteous, he loves justice, the upright will see his face." So it grounds everything, the examination, the passionate hatred, the fiery judgment in God's core character. He is righteous, he loves justice, that's the foundation. And then completely opposite to the wicked's fate, the upright, it says, will see his face. What does that promise mean, to see his face, especially after everything else we've read?
Seeing his face in this context usually implies intimacy, divine favor, acceptance, and ultimately life in God's presence. It's the ultimate blessing. So if we take a step back and look at the whole psalm, what does it give us? It presents a picture of God who's deeply involved, who sees everything, who evaluates, and who responds decisively based on people's character and actions. There are very different outcomes for the righteous and the wicked. And importantly, within this framework of divine justice that the psalm builds, God's passionate hatred for the wicked and those who love violence is presented as part of his righteousness, part of his love for justice. It really does complicate that simple hate the sin, love the sinner formula, because here the psalm makes strong distinctions between the people themselves.
Okay, let's bring this all together then, especially for you listening. What does this one specific text, Psalm 11, suggest about that common saying, God hates the sin but loves the sinner? Well, when you look right at verse 5, it seems to present God as actively hating a category of people, the wicked, those who love violence. Not just their actions, not just an abstract idea. It uses this incredibly strong, passionate language directed at individuals defined by their nature and deeds. Now, let me be clear. This isn't about us promoting hatred. Not at all. It's about honestly looking at the direct words used in this ancient source.
Precisely. And that's why digging into texts like this matters. It forces us beyond maybe overly simple or comfortable interpretations. It pushes us to engage directly with the source material, even when it's challenging. So the question it raises for you listening right now is, how do you hold this text alongside other biblical passages? How do you reconcile common theological sayings with the very direct, maybe even jarring language we find right here in Psalm 11? It encourages a deeper dive and more thoughtful engagement rather than just accepting things at face value.
Yeah, our exploration of Psalm 11 definitely gives us a very clear, very direct, and maybe uncomfortable perspective on God's judgment and emotions. It's a perspective that demands careful thought, especially alongside other things we believe or have been taught. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today.
And maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to ponder. What does it really mean for our understanding of both justice and mercy if, according to a text like Psalm 11, God's passionate hatred for the wicked is presented as just as much a part of his character as his love for justice and the upright?
We definitely encourage you to go back, reread Psalm 11 for yourself, and keep digging into these fascinating, sometimes challenging ancient texts. Until next time.